Yes, welcome into the camp. The Badgers were on the field for practice this morning. They were in pads for the first time, Jesse, of fall camp. Very exciting stuff.
Yeah, it absolutely is. We don't get a ton of opportunities to see this team in practice situations go fully live, scrimmage type situations. You might get one of those, two of those in the spring and in preseason. Luke Fickell made it very clear before practices even began that one of the things he wanted to do and something he didn't do enough of last season is do more live reps, more scrimmage opportunities so he can see what these players have and which guys the coaching staff can trust. And day one of being in full pads in the fifth practice overall provided that opportunity because Luke said afterward they went 75 plus plays of live reps.
They did, and we'll get into all of it. We'll talk about some running backs that I thought stood out. We'll talk about the quarterbacks that had a little bit of a mixed bag. They'll both finished with touchdown drives, and I'm sure we'll get into that. And then also maybe a defender or two that stood out, including Amari Snowden, who had an interception at the goal line. The big 6'4" redshirt freshman cornerback. We'll get into all of that. But the Badgers back on the field. And Home Field is back here on the camp as well, the official sponsor, apparel sponsor of the camp. Absolutely the best when it comes to that vintage college gear that you can get. And they're back in a big way with their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign, which includes platinum football boxes. They have 3 never-before-seen Badgers items that you can't get anywhere else. It also includes a hat, these core collection socks, a koozie, and a platinum pass. That pass gives you actually early access to future releases from Home Field. The boxes go on sale next Friday. They're going to sell out. You can get 15% off by using the promo code Bucky24. You can find more information up on homefield.com. All right, let's get into what we saw on Saturday morning, Jesse. And I think I'd like to start with Tawee Walker because I thought his running kind of got the offense started a little bit for the first team group because Chez Mellusi didn't take part in any of the 11-on-11 work. So it was a lot of Tawee Walker, and he showed out. And I think, the fourth down play that comes to mind is the one that I think maybe where we should start.
There's a couple plays that stand out from Walker. He is an absolute tank, and he's really continued what he did in the spring. But when you go full pads, and I know you asked Luke about this afterward, it really shows what Walker is all about. He's 218 pounds, 5'9", but he's got good burst and a ton of power. And I think he really got things started with a drive where he had back-to-back 9-yard runs. But the play you're referencing was another couple play sequence where you just kind of go, wow. I mean, there's really not much else you can say, but there was a 4th and 3 situation. They gave the ball to Walker. He plowed right up the middle and got 10 yards. And so gave him a new life for the offense. And then the best play of the day is the one that Wisconsin's football Twitter account put up where he scored a touchdown around the left side. They gave him the ball and made 3 defenders just kind of look silly. I think Austin Brown came in and tried to tackle him at the legs and slipped a little bit. And Tackett Curtis tried to get in there high, and Walker shed him. And I think it was Hunter Wooler at the very end, right before the goal line. And Walker ended up getting an 8-yard touchdown run on a 1st and goal situation. So it was really impressive. I think what he has done so far has created, in my mind, a legitimate question about whether he could be the number 1 running back on the team this season. Certainly, it will depend on whether Chez Mellusi is 100% and how he looks and his ability to come back from the injury that he had last season. Regardless, that's a really good 1-2 combination. But Walker has been so consistent and so powerful. And what a pickup from the transfer portal out of a guy that was just a backup at Oklahoma and now looks like he's going to have a major role in his 1 year left of eligibility here at Wisconsin.
It's remarkable. It is remarkable. I know that the folks at Oklahoma were wondering kind of why he didn't get more opportunities. I know that he was wondering why he didn't get more opportunities there and wanted to be the guy, never got to be the guy. And I don't necessarily think he'll be the guy at Wisconsin, but he could be the first guy. And certainly what we saw today lends me to feel that way about it as well. The other running back that really did stand out, and a guy that I think many of us, I think even both of us have maybe overlooked a little bit, was Jackson Acker and some of the stuff that he was able to do. Another guy that when you put the pads on, things kind of change a little bit.
Very much so. And overlooked is exactly right, because we've been talking about this Ches Malusi Tawee Walker combo, we've spent plenty of time talking about, and we will continue to talk about the two four-star freshmen that have come in here, and Darian Dupree and Dylan Jones, and what could their role be. Meanwhile, Jackson Aker's been sitting here like, what about me, man? I've been able to play a lot of games. He was a starting fullback 2 seasons ago, and certainly there was a transition in this new offense of him moving into a running back situation. And I wondered and still wonder what exactly his role is going to be. Is he going to be more of a blocker? But he's very powerful with the ball in his hands, and I think he's a much better route runner and pass catcher than people would give him credit for, because there were a couple of occasions where Tyler Van Dyke found him for really long gains. One of them, I think, went for 20+ yards, and then Acker finished off one of those drives with a touchdown. In fact, I think it was really a 3-play sequence. It was a touchdown series. And I should mention that when Wisconsin had offensive success here in this scrimmage type situation, they put the ball at the defense's 25-yard line. So it certainly put the offense in an advantageous situation. But Acker had the ball in his hands on all 3 plays and was responsible for that touchdown series. Now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee you're going to have a role this season, but I think it bodes well and speaks to really the depth and the talent that this running back room has, where you're trying to figure out who can you utilize and how can you play them.
And I think he's a guy that you just don't know exactly what his role is going to be. And I thought Luke Fickell kind of talked about that as well, right? When he was asked about Jackson Acker, he said that once we get back to, I think he even said kind of back to Madison, going to have to figure out exactly what his best role is going to be and where he can help them the most. But today it was when he had the ball in his hands. Other times in camp, it's been when he's been as a blocker, right? They've been using those 2 back sets, and he's kind of been the lead guy, which we know is something that he's very comfortable with.
Yeah, it's like he's a de facto fullback in those kinds of situations.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously spent much time, as Badgers fans may have as well, lamenting the death of the fullback in this new offense, but you still need guys to block, and you need to get into it in however way you're going to in this system. And Acker has that skill set. And there have been several plays, even early in this first week of preseason practice, where he gets on the edge or gets up the middle and he will spring the ball carrier. So that is extremely valuable. And I can see him occupying that role to get him more snaps on the field. But if there is a situation where they feel like they need to get him the ball, the Badgers can feel good about what he can provide.
So those were the top 2 guys that stood out, but obviously we need to talk about the 2 4-star freshmen, as you mentioned, Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree. And I don't know that we necessarily always are people that are in the press box screaming, he's wide open, he's wide open.
Yes.
That's not really something that we do, but we kind of did it today. There was a situation where Darian Dupree was out in the flat around the goal line, may have scored, and Tyler Van Dyke was looking the other way, and it felt like he could have gotten the ball to him. But I think that's kind of where our mindset is at. It's just like, get the ball in his hands so we can see what he can do. And I think that's the same case for Dylan Jones.
Well, they're just entertaining players. And I think some of this has to do with the newness of it all of, okay, we've spent a lot of time talking about these guys. Let's see what they have. And we've seen some glimpses here, but the talent clearly there. And both those guys got a lot more second team opportunities today. And that was certainly intentional. And I think both showed more flashes of what they can do. It wasn't necessarily a huge play. One play comes to mind specifically with Dupree, where he got the ball and probably a lot of other running backs would have been tackled for no gain, and he turned nothing into something. It ended up being a 4-yard gain because of his quickness and playmaking ability. And so that's not necessarily going to wow you in the box score, but it's just one of those things he's capable of doing. We've talked before about his pass catching ability and the moves that he can make. And Dylan Jones, certainly deserving of the opportunities that he's received. I think he has done very well with them. He had a run today around the edge for about 12 yards. So both those guys, I imagine, will continue to earn more opportunities, because this staff has a few weeks to figure out whether these guys are people they can go with at the start of the season. And obviously things can change throughout the year, but I think both of them have the talent to be able to contribute. I just think it's highly unlikely that you'll see both of them consistently contributing. Could one? I think that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah, I think as we mentioned yesterday, I think they're just in a much better spot in their running back room than they were at this time last year. And it's not just maybe with the ball in their hands either, right? I thought there were a couple times where Darian Dupree would step up into the hole that a linebacker was blitzing through, and his pass pro, he's a willing pass blocker. I think that is something that I will say. He stuck his nose in there a couple times against guys that were coming on blitzes and more than held his own. So yeah, that is all of those guys had their opportunities today, and I thought we all saw a little good from all of them. Let's go to the quarterbacks, because That is obviously a huge topic and is going to continue to be a huge topic until a decision is made. And then when a decision is made, everyone's going to be wondering about the other guy, right? Who's going to be, can we see the other guy? Like, that's just the way that the quarterback battle usually is. I thought it was a bit of a mixed bag today for them. I will say that they finished well. You mentioned the 25-yard line. They both led touchdown drives on the final 2 possessions of practice. I will let you take it from there, just because, I mean, there were some good and there were some bad.
Yeah, so obviously I'm going back looking through my notes and trying to dissect what we saw during the scrimmage sequence. And based on the notes that I have, I think there were 14 series in total during that scrimmage. And I asked Luke specifically about Tyler and Braedyn afterward, and he wants to see what happens with this. He said they're going to give them a few more practices to try to figure things out. And of course, he would like to see, as he put it, a decision sooner rather than later, just for the sake of continuity. But one of those guys is going to have to earn it. But his big thing for today was he wanted to make sure they got equal opportunities. And so of those 14 series, I had Van Dyke getting 6 of them, Locke getting 5, and then maybe Matire ended up with 3 with the third team offense. But you're right. Mixed bag is the right way to put it. I don't think either guy has done enough to separate himself, certainly at this point. And there's both good and bad. I mean, you mentioned the Amari Snowden interception. That was a play that Braedyn is absolutely going to want back. It was a pretty long drive. And so that was one of the series that didn't just start at the defense's 25, but they got to the 11-yard line and he threw a pass into the front right corner intended for Hakan Anderson and did not see somehow Amari Snowden standing in front there. And Snowden picked it off. It went right to him. And there was another defender behind Anderson, so it might have been tough anyway. But you cannot give up points in the red zone, certainly. But you're right. Locke led a couple touchdown drives. Both those guys led a pair of touchdown drives, and all of them, again, were inside the 25. But he threw a nice touchdown pass to Tretch Kakahuna, made a handful of other good throws. And then with Van Dyke, same type of situation. I mean, you're looking for one of these guys to be consistent. I don't think we've necessarily seen that yet. You mentioned the throw to Dupree, or the non-throw. I thought he had him wide open in the flat, and he ended up looking somewhere else for an incompletion. And then on 4th down, offensive line probably didn't help him, but Elijah Hills went in there, got into the backfield, and batted the ball away. But then he comes back and has a couple nice throws. The one to Jackson Acker threw, a touchdown pass of his own. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is neither guy has separated himself. And I'm sure the Badgers would want to see one of them do so, but they're going to keep riding this out, at least for a few more days where they get equal reps.
Are you a little surprised that there hasn't been separation?
I am, especially where I felt like we finished things in the spring, just because it seemed like Van Dyke made such a leap over the second half of spring. But there have been several months between then, and you're really starting to ramp up now, and you've got a new set of players. And that's part of it too. You're still working with both the first and second team offenses, and all their drives were shifting between the first and the second team group. So, but having said that, absolutely, I would have thought maybe he comes in and takes it right away, and it's just maybe taking a little bit longer than people would have wanted, but they'll figure it out. I mean, there's still quite a while until the opener.
Yeah, I think it's certainly playing out similar to the way spring did, where it was kind of a slow start. And maybe as we get towards the back half of all the practices that we're going to get to see before they close things up, in the middle of the month here, maybe we'll see one of those guys take a leap, because that's what we saw in the spring. We saw Tyler Van Dyke take a leap forward. Other things offensively for you that stood out today. The offensive line, it felt like there were some holes there. We talk about the running backs, but it felt like there were some holes and some opportunities for guys. And I know that Tawee and Jackson Acker are running through some guys that maybe were in their way, but the offensive line, I thought, got a nice push.
Yeah, and sometimes that can be tough to judge, which I know I've said several times, but this was not one of those practices where it felt like everybody coming off the edge is just getting into the backfield and disrupting plays, and I don't even know how this offense is going to run a play. But there have been stretches where sometimes it felt like that, and because that wasn't what happened, I think that's indicative of the job that the line did, and certainly those rushing opportunities were created in part by the offensive line. So that has been very important for this offense. From a playmaking standpoint at wide receiver or tight end, I don't know that there was a guy that consistently stood out. CJ Williams came up with a really good catch. And I think when I was mentioning Locke before, he did a good job of performing when his back was against the wall, because I think of a couple drives where they're at the 25, and one of them in particular, it ended up being a touchdown drive. he took a sack, an 8-yard loss. James Thompson Jr. came in there, and it may have been just a incorrect RPO read, whatever it was. You're facing a 2nd and 18. I think it was a 3rd and 18, and he completed a 15-yard pass to C.J. Williams to put the offense in position to even convert that 4th down that Tawee Walker finished. Yeah. So there's that, but I'm not sure there were a ton of other consistent playmakers. Now, Tyrell Henry caught a touchdown pass, had another nice catch from Van Dyke. So they've got some options, just not the wow guy like we saw from Tawee Walker today.
Yeah, for sure. Defensively, it's a little bit. This is the same thing that we went through earlier, and we go through every time they're going against each other. For one side to be good, the other side has to be bad, or or if I guess if it's a guy making a great play, you give credit. The Snowden, that's a great catch, put himself in a good spot, just throwing right to him, right? Like so, but that still stands out. And when he makes plays, you notice that. And I thought it was kind of funny that Luke Fickell was saying that his 9-year-olds, I believe they're twins, right?
Yes.
Yeah, his 9-year-old twin boys are there, and they're like, even they know when Amari makes a play because it's pretty obvious. But yeah, that was a really nice play for him. President Zachman showed up again, but I thought the defensive line, there's a lot of good there, but the running game is still, for me, a little bit of a concern, and the ability to run the ball against this defense. And there were guys in and out, a lot of mixing and matching, as happens in these scrimmages. But what did you see on that from that point of view? Did you when you see an offensive line and a running game moving the ball like they did, do you look at the defense? You're like,
So it's tough because it's easier to see when the offense, when a guy or a unit is doing well offensively, because I can mark the yardage and I can say, oh, Tawee Walker just had a 20-yard run or whatever it was. And defensively, it's not like, well, this guy had 11 tackles in this sequence. That's a little bit harder to determine. But so there's individual moments, right? I mentioned the James Thompson Jr. getting in for a sack. There's one play that comes to mind where Brandon Lane just buried his guy and ended up stuffing one of the tailback. It might have been Dylan Jones, but I'm not quite sure. But it doesn't matter because it was like, that's why they brought him here.
It was Jones.
Yeah. So, but consistently, and you're right. If the running game is starting to do some work, then that means that up front defensively, it's not as good as it needs to be. The other thing is, I don't know that every guy that you're going to see in the opener is out there as much as they will be during the season. And it's kind of like the same with the offense, but they're rotating so much defensively that even if trying to keep track of it from a notes perspective, it can be a challenge because that's how many bodies they're putting in there, especially in that front seven. So I don't know if that fully answers what you're asking. I'm just trying to kind of couch this by saying it makes it more challenging to figure out.
It is, because there is a lot of rotation. There are guys that are being held out that, that's just the way that it is. Luke Fickell actually, he mentioned there's some guys that are dinged up, and there's some guys that are dinged up that are not necessarily out there and taking part. But that means we get to see others, right? Like Tacker Curtis got a ton of work today, a guy that we haven't seen a ton because he missed most of spring as he was coming back off that injury. And I thought he ran around and did the hitting that you expect Tacker Curtis to do. And then there's, I think who else? Thomas Heiberger getting a lot more work these first 5 days of camp because unfortunately, Aaron Witt a little dinged up right now. And, Luke Fickell said they expect, could be 7 to 10 days with him. It's thankfully not his foot, which obviously has been the long concern for him, going back all the way to 2021. So that has allowed Thomas Heiberger a whole lot more work. And I think he has certainly shown up and showed out at times.
Yeah, I mean, even someone like Braedyn Moore comes to mind because he had multiple really good plays today where he can come off the edge and stuff a run. There's a 4th down run that comes to mind. I think it was another one with Jones, and he was responsible for stopping it. And it ended up, I think Wisconsin had a 5th down and kicked a field goal. But those are the kinds of things you can do in this session. We should also say, by the way, I had marked down 3 instances where the offense was penalized, and Luke, because it was all the officials were there. So that was full-on scrimmage type situation. And Luke just said, just keep going for the offense because they didn't have a ton of momentum early on, and he just wanted to give them an opportunity to have some more success. So even when we're talking about these scrimmage situations, it's not exactly like you would see during an actual game, but it's the best example that we can have for that. But back to your topic on the defensive guys, I thought more stood out.
Yeah, just a second with the Luke Fickell thing. What did he say about that? Because I also think, like, he said, yeah, I did do that, but he also was like, we get to correct them. We get to correct them here that maybe we don't get to correct them on a Saturday.
Yeah, I said everyone is human. I wasn't. I'd have to go back and really listen to it. I mean, it was there's the purpose is a variety of reasons. One, offense did not start off very well.
Right.
Both quarterbacks had some 3-and-outs, and you want to create some momentum. There was actually first flag that I can remember is Van Dyke had a really nice throw to Tretch Kahuna over the middle, and Tretch was able to do what Tretch does and get 5 extra yards and get to midfield. And all of a sudden, there's a flag that comes in, and Luke just said, "Pick it up." And the offense ended up having a decent series. There was even a holding and fourth or at the goal line that was a touchdown run. And I know there was another one in there, but
there were 3 of them.
It was to get the offense rolling. And he said there's times where you do it for the players, but also for the coaches. The coaches might be sitting there going, wait a minute, the ball should be back there. It should be 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 15. But it forces them to adjust and adapt. So there's that. And then maybe he felt the officials missed a call or called one too many. Either way, it's just worth pointing out when we're having this discussion about the scrimmages that was part of it as well.
Yeah, I don't know. And we were talking about this afterwards, a couple of us, about, I don't know that I've seen a holding call on like a goal line play on a run to the middle like that. That didn't make any sense. It felt maybe they were calling things a little bit tight for that. The other 2 were illegal procedure, and I don't. So obviously, guys moving or lining up, lining up incorrectly, which is obviously, not things you want, but also things that are correctable. And it's only August 3rd, right? So, yeah, I'm sure they'll get that figured out. But you said some other guys for you standing out on defense.
Yeah, well, Braedyn Moore is certainly one of them. They're just different moments from different guys. Like Daryl Peterson had a sack. There's
a
lot of individual moments is kind of where I'm at right now. But offering full evaluations of a position group is a little tougher.
It definitely is. It definitely is. But through 5 practices here, the groups that we had our biggest questions were probably the defensive line, right? That was a big question coming in. Quarterback, obviously. What was the running back situation going to look like? And the depth along the offensive line. Do you have a better feel for any of those?
I think we've pretty much addressed all of them other than the offensive line at this point. I feel like the offensive line depth is better than maybe I would have thought. I mean, they've got the top 5. Right. We know who the top 5 are when healthy. It's very clear. And the whole goal or one of the goals is figuring out what happens if something happens to those top guys. I mean, JP Benchwall has been the 6th guy. Barrett Nelson has been impressive just in the opportunities that he's gotten. He's gotten first team reps at, I think, guard and tackle. He's obviously extremely versatile. So they're trying to figure that out. Emerson Mandel getting a second team rep at right tackle. I don't think we're going to necessarily see him this season, but for true freshmen, even to get 2 reps is a really big deal on the O-line. So that's part of the challenge that AJ Blazek and Casey Robach have to figure out.
I thought coming in that Emerson Mandel was going to be more of an inside guy, but it feels like, and the same thing with Colin Cubberly, who has been moved to the inside, even though he played all over the place in the spring. He's kind of settled in at guard, at least at certain points that we've seen. But Emerson Mandel being on the outside was a little bit of a surprise, at least to me. Either way, those backup spots, I think, are going to be important. I know we've talked about this a ton, and we mentioned it a bunch. They were just extremely lucky injury-wise last year along the offensive line. It doesn't feel like that is going to be the case every single year, and they have some guys that have been dinged up in the past that we'll see if they're able to stay healthy, as they obviously want them to do. The other aspect of this that we haven't really talked about at all is the kicking game and what we've seen so far from Nathaniel Vakos and some of the guys behind him. They've done some kicking the last couple of practices. They did obviously the field goal kicking within the scrimmaging today. What do you think we've seen? Is Nathaniel Vakos kind of? I think he's on the what is it? What's the kicking award? The National Kicking Award. I forget what it's called.
Lou Groza?
The Lou Groza Award. He's on the watch list. I'm sure with like 70 other guys. But what'd you think of him so far?
I mean, he's probably wanting to make every single kick. You'd want him to be able to hit maybe at a slightly higher rate, but I think he's been solid.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, the other day they had the first field goal kicking session that we had a chance to see, and Vakos took the first 5. He made the first 4. He missed the 5th. It was off the right upright from 47, but he had also just made one from 47. I thought it was interesting that next up was Gavin Lom, who's got an unbelievable leg, cleared the goalposts with plenty of room to spare. And then Gianni Smith was the third guy up, who was the Portland State transfer. Today, Smith got a couple of opportunities as a field goal kicker, but I mean, this is all Vakos. And I think, to me, it comes down to whether you can trust him in those 48 plus type situations. Obviously, I mean, I still don't know whether you necessarily can. And they found themselves in situations last year where, and I know maybe he wasn't 100%. What are you going to do when you get to the 34-yard line or the 33-yard line and it's a 4th and medium or something like that? Are you going to bring him out there to try the 3 points and feel really good about it? Or are you going to go for it offensively and put yourself in a position where if you don't get it, you might be in trouble? And I'm just wondering what's going to happen there. But Vakos is very clearly number 1, which is what we expected.
Punt
from the 34.
It'd be a nice ode to Paul Chris, but they had an opportunity. I mean, there were a couple of times last year where they were kind of like in, I don't want to say no man's land, but kind of where they didn't feel good enough to kick a field goal. I'm thinking of Ohio State. There was, I think it was like 4th and 6. They were down, I think it was 17-10 at that time, or I think they were down a touchdown and they didn't kick the field goal. They didn't go for it. They punted, and the next play, Travion Henderson rips off a long run around the left side, and all of a sudden they're right back to where they were. Now, again, Wisconsin's defense that game against Ohio State was playing well enough that you want to, back them up and make them come out. This wasn't Ohio State of 2022 where Paul Chris is punting from the 40-yard line because we thought we'd get him backed up, as even though they had not stopped C.J. Stroud whatsoever, and that offense had not been stopped at all. But there were some times last year where you thought, okay, maybe they're going to kick a field goal here, and they didn't. And thinking back to the Indiana game as well, where they had some opportunities and they didn't. Where do they feel comfortable with Nathaniel Vakos? How far out do they feel comfortable with him?
That's the one that I can't answer. I mean, they've tried him from about 47, 48, I think, so far. And again, we haven't seen a ton of kicking opportunities. Haven't seen him take any 50-plus kicks thus far. But I think that's when you start to wonder. And he's done it. He did it when he was at Ohio. He had a really good freshman season for the Bobcats. Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of where they feel comfortable with, of his leg strength, his confidence level, and but he's capable of it.
What about punting? Should we be feeling any better about the punt game than at this time than it was last year? Because I don't know that we would count that among the strengths of the 2023 Wisconsin Badgers.
Yeah, we haven't. I mean, they do punt sessions, but it's not like a scrimmage punting situation.
Right.
So I almost feel like they are who they are. I don't know. It's also tough sometimes for me to gauge. I'm not tracking the distances and the hang time, which obviously are the two things that matter most for a punter. But certainly that's an area that they could use development here with Atticus Bertram's in his second year at Wisconsin.
Very much so. All right. So 5 days in, what is the one thing, if you were to be putting together a list of things that you've learned so far here in fall camp, what would be the one thing that is most notable that people should know that you've learned through these first 5 practices?
Well, initially, my inclination is just to say the running backs, because I feel like I've talked about them or written about them in every practice. That Tawee Walker is better than advertised, and there's a lot of talent with the two freshman running backs. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I know
Yeah,
that's
it's
probably
tough.
not what people want to hear, but I mean, running back and quarterback, those are the things that have been most obvious at this point in the fall.
Look, the running back is obviously going to stand out because we saw what happened last year, right? Like where they lose Ches, Braylon's dinged up, and things were not good beyond that. And I think if they were in that same situation this year, if you're to lose Ches, I think they're in a really, really good spot to deal with that this time around. You don't want that to happen. Ches, when he was on the field last year, was really, really good, especially in breaking off some long runs. But when you have the room that they have now, I think they could deal with some of that stuff better this time around than they could last year. I would just say I think overall, and we saw this in the spring, I think overall team wide, they are a more talented team
Yes.
and a deeper team than they were last year. And I think that will continue as they continue to recruit. But that to me, we were talking a little bit about today when we were watching the third team offense and defense. And in most years, you just look at it and be like, none of these guys are going to play. Like, I don't know that any of these guys are ever going to play. And this time around, seeing some of the guys that are on those teams, eventually you would think, assuming things work out the way that everyone wants them to, that they are going to have a chance to compete. And I think that just speaks to the overall talent of the team. And again, I don't know that it's going to mean more wins. Doesn't mean they're going to win more games or anything like that. I just think it's a deeper and more talented team than it was last year.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. There's been some significant turnover with transfer portal and all that, and it feels like they've got people that are better positioned to fit what these coaches are asking them to do. But the third team is a good example. I think is looking at the defensive line, you see, wow, there's Jamel Howard's out there and Dylan Johnson's out there, Ernest Willard Jr. is out there. Like that is feels like the future on the defensive line. And I know I've gotten a lot of questions about the line and the young guys, and I think there's some frustration that why aren't they being mentioned more? Why aren't they a part of the two deep at this point? And it takes some development at that position in particular, but that's a good example of the talent. And I felt like we saw that at times last year with the secondary about all these freshmen that they brought in. So, yes, they're a deeper, more talented team. But the question is, does that translate to more wins and an actual better product on the field? They're going to have to go prove it.
Yeah, and they are less than a month out from being able to give them, or I should say, less than a month out from having that opportunity against Western Michigan, and then South Dakota, and then Alabama coming still over a month away, but get to be here very, very soon. We are getting the day off tomorrow, or at least from practice. I don't know what their plans are down there, but practice not open to the media tomorrow, so we will be taking tomorrow off for the camp. We'll be back on Monday to break down what we see Monday morning down there in Platteville. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.